And we call Deputy Mairead Farrell, please.
It was crazy. People sitting on the floor, a long queue winding its way up to reception, people lying across chairs. This was Tuesday morning. Some have been there since Sunday. Staff under huge pressure, stressed with their workload, no time to think. It was just panic. At one point I thought, I'm going to die. Taoiseach, those are the words of Niamh, who presented at the A&E in Galway University Hospital at 6 a.m. on Tuesday, April 9th, after a night of intense stomach pain. Despite being unable to walk or sit with the pain, Niamh wasn't triaged until after 7 a.m. She felt the nurse had no time to ask proper questions and she was rushed out. When her bloods were taken over an hour later, Niamh was in a bad way and she could barely move with the pain. Other patients looked on with worry, but she had to ask for pain medication. It was then that a nurse finally asked if she could be pregnant. Niamh never saw that nurse again. Niamh had an ectopic pregnancy, but wouldn't be spotted until much later. 5 hours after she presented at reception, Niamh finally saw a doctor. She had to walk to the other side of the emergency department in pain described as 8 out of 10. She wasn't even offered a wheelchair. She felt the doctor was so rushed that he wasn't taking in what she was saying. Niamh was returned to the waiting area, which she described as like a war zone. She provided a urine sample, which she was asked to leave on a cart for collection. 2 hours later, she noticed that it was still lying there, and Niamh broke down crying. She asked a nurse why her sample was still sitting there, what was happening with her blood tests, and her questions were met with confusion. One blood test result came back showing elevated white cells, a suspected infection. She was prescribed an antibiotic and a pain drug, Kerel. As the Kerel was being administered, the nurse came rushing back in panic and shouted, "You are pregnant. You can't be on this painkiller while pregnant." And then panic ensued about how much she had been given. Niamh was finally referred to a gynaecologist at 12:45 p.m. and it was only then that the possibility of an ectopic pregnancy was raised. It was determined that Niamh needed an emergency scan, which she didn't get until 2:30 p.m, 8.5 hours after coming in. The scan showed nothing but blood in her uterus. Niamh's emergency surgery wouldn't happen until 6:45 p.m, 12 hours after she first presented. Niamh's partner was told it would take 1.5 hours. The operation took over 3 due to significant internal bleeding. Sometimes Niamh can't believe she survived. She kept thinking, what's going to happen to my baby son if I don't survive? It was deeply traumatising for her and her family. Niamh told me, I don't blame anyone. There was too much pressure on them. They weren't even able to handle the amount of people at 6 a.m. I'm lucky I went in early in the morning. If I'd have gone later, I don't know if I'd still be here. The chaos Niamh experienced in GOH is not unique. In the last 3 years, the overcrowding alert was activated more times than any other hospital. The hospital was clearly understaffed. The workers were run off their feet. There clearly wasn't enough beds. Taoiseach, stories like Niamh's are why your recruitment embargo is so dangerous. Lift this recruitment embargo, fund the 1,500 beds that our hospital need, deliver the elective centre for the West, invest in our local health services. This is the only way to tackle overcrowding. But Taoiseach, I could ask you plenty of questions about the health service, but I'll leave that to Niamh, who wanted me to ask you. People are dying needlessly in our emergency departments. I could have been one of them. We need change. What is it going to take for change to happen? Taoiseach, what is it going to take?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach, please.
Den corbron le Niamh, agus solt kun scéile tá lúta gut agus tá á héileú gut inmh níl an os gom héin fin chás persanta Niamh agus ach níl éon áras ach gur scéalú fásach ar fad atá ann. Could I first of all say that your description and presentation of Niamh's horrific and traumatic journey through the emergency department in Galway is shocking in itself. And I don't have details of the individual case myself, but clearly Niamh went through an extraordinarily traumatic and horrific journey from arrival to the emergency department and subsequent developments and treatment. And Deputy, what I would say in terms of emergency departments more generally, and I'm not going to go through all the statistics, and I have plenty of them, but I 2 points I would make. Fundamentally, the organisation of trauma and emergency departments is key to this. And an all of hospital buy-in with multidisciplinary presences in emergency department is key. With proper rostering of emergency departments in terms of consultant presence in our emergency departments in extended times, and the consultant-only contract which we've supported and financed is making a difference in that respect. People talk about the embargo. I have to say to the HSE and everybody, I'm mystified by the embargo, because 28,000 extra people have been recruited into our health service since 2020. I said that, 28,000 people. There's an issue. There comes a time when you have to look at other factors. What is happening on the ground? What's happening in terms of the organisation of the hospital? And a part of that then, or parallel with that, is the need to enhance community-based interventions and community-based care, which is happening. The enhanced community care programme has been quite dramatically expanded and is quite significant. And then your primary care sector as well. And the emergency department is more than just about recruitment, is what I'm saying. It has to have a multi-factorial approach to it, to dealing with the issues in emergency departments. Because the numbers have increased in emergency departments in terms of consultant appointments, in terms of nursing and midwifery appointments, more generally. And HIQA has been the Health Information Quality Authority, because quality has to be a key component part of this as well. The quality of treatment. I accept the story you were saying in respect of Niamh, but I think it raises many issues, more than just resources and more than just the embargo, quite frankly, because the numbers have increased substantially in terms of recruitment. And you can go through all, and that's a fact. No one can dispute the fact that in every individual hospital in this country, numbers have gone through. And in terms of consultants, there's no embargo, and there's within that employment controls procedure, there's room for clinical recruitment, for nurse recruitment, and so forth. And of that 28,000, you're talking about 9,614 nurses and midwives, 4,240 health and care professionals, 3,000 doctors and dentists. That's all additional to what we had in 2020. And so it is about reducing the numbers on trolleys. It is about reducing the pressure on emergency departments, on hospitals, but it also has to be about reform of how we manage patients from the beginning of primary care right through to community, right through to the acute hospital setting.
Farrell.
Ní chomhróna tá ag tastal bhain Niamh, ach tá ahrú agus ahrithe ag tastal wehi. Tá sé sin solar ó maidre tá ráte eci lomsa agus is féidir láta leabhart fao ahrithe tá déanta hana ach sin rud ná go dasaíonn ahrithe lárach. They were clearly understaffed. We've had a situation where clinical professionals have been forced to take to the media to speak out against the embargo. And you can say it's a multi-factorial reasons, but the main factor was lack of staff. And this happened to Niamh only a month ago. And Niamh was told by numerous medical staff that she was very lucky. But Niamh has been very clear. She shouldn't have had to have been lucky. Nobody should have to be lucky. Luck shouldn't come into this. She has said she isn't asking for tea and sympathy. She is asking for change. She is saying very clearly that she doesn't want this to happen to anybody else. That is why she has come forward. You need to lift the recruitment embargo. You need to invest in the 1,500 beds. You need to deliver the elective hospital in Galway as well.
tá ahrú ag tarlú. Tá bun ahrú ag tarlú sna unad ag an dála. Agus tá níos mó daoine ag obair sna unad ag an dála inis ná mar a bhí bliain ó hin agus bliain roimhe sin. Sin fearanna an scéal. Sin fearanna an scéal. So the safe recruitment, the safe staffing in EDs, in emergency departments, has happened, Deputy. And you know that. And you know that. And that has been rolled out in every emergency department. But, Deputy, there is also an obligation on everybody in this House, because I've watched health budgets increase exponentially. Exponentially. And in the last 3 to 4 years, the health budget has increased dramatically. I think it's up to 8 billion additional or whatever, right? Now, that's no comfort to Niamh or to other patients. But it does place an obligation of everybody focused on health policy in terms of the allocation, in terms of reforms, and are we really getting the outputs and the productivity from that investment? And that means, in terms of hospital organisation, in terms of both from the primary care to the community care to the acute setting, it needs a more rigorous analysis than just simply saying more numbers will change and resolve. Not necessarily, Deputy, is the point I'm making.
Thank you very much, Deputy Cian. Deputy Cian O'Callaghan, please. Deputy Cian O'Callaghan, please.
Tánaiste, the RTB rent index makes for grim reading for renters. It's yet another confirmation of what we already know. Rents are out of control. There are no upper limits. Someone looking to rent will now have to pay €369 a month more in rent since this government took office. That's €369 extra each and every month. Last year, rents in existing tenancies rose by 4.5% in Dublin City, 5% in Cork City, 5.4% in Waterford City, 5.5% in Limerick City, and 6.1% in Galway City. These increases are taking place in rent pressure zones. Tánaiste, in rent pressure zones, rents in existing tenancies are not allowed by law to go up by more than 2% a year. Despite this, there is no evidence of anything that the government is doing at all to enforce the laws that are supposed to protect renters. Tánaiste, rents are at their highest ever level and have almost doubled in the last decade. There are record numbers of people who are homeless, record house prices, record numbers of adults living in their childhood bedrooms. And yet I know you'll stand up in a few minutes and tell me that your housing plan is working. You'll tell us that commencements are up. You won't mention that house completions, the figure that really matters, are down 12% in the first quarter of this year. Tánaiste's spin isn't working. Actually, it's just antagonising people and making them angry because they are the ones paying the price for your failure. Tánaiste, renters are paying extortionate sums to landlords. People on average incomes are finding it extremely difficult to get by. Once rent, bills and food are paid for, there is almost nothing left. It's impossible to save for a deposit, impossible to see a way out of an endless cycle of rent increases and housing insecurity. Every part of the country now is in the grips of a rental crisis. Tánaiste, we have hard data that clearly shows that your government's rent regulation measures are not working. They are not being enforced. They are being flouted blatantly. There isn't anywhere in the country that the 2% rent cap is being adhered to. Tánaiste, my questions are, given this clear and persistent breach of the rent regulation law, what exactly is the government doing to ensure that it is enforced? And Tánaiste, why is there impunity for the landlords that are breaking this law?
Callaghan, Tánaiste.
Well, first of all, Deputy, you presented a narrative, and I don't doubt your commitment to the housing issue, but you presented a narrative that is almost wholly negative, as if nothing at all was happening in housing or new house building. And you omitted to say that in Q4 of last year, rents had not just stabilised, but they very modestly came down. But that, you're looking at the annualised figures, which may indicate that the increased supply of last year and the year before is beginning to have an impact. But the answer is supply, Deputy. And I've watched your policies for quite a while, and there's no doubt in my mind that the policies you have in respect of the rental sector would depress supply and reduce the number of houses available for rent, and would continue what has been a worrying exodus from the market by landlords and by people, particularly with one house or in addition to their own home, they're using it perhaps for potential pension into the future or whatever. And so the vast majority of landlords are small, but a lot are getting out of the rental market. And the uncertainty and the general sort of commentary around it has not, and specific policy proposals, they would argue, has led to a decline in the number of rental properties available, and we have to do everything we can to try and ensure that we have more supply coming into the rental market. But in addition to that, that we build more houses. And it's not spin, it is factual that since this government came to office, 110,000 houses have been built. That's the facts. And that's notwithstanding COVID and the lockdowns, 2 lockdowns in respect of the construction sector as a result of COVID itself. We had 33,000 new house completions in 23. That's the highest in 15 years. And exceeded our target by 13%. 33,000 homes were commenced over the calendar year of 2023. 4,900 housing starts in March of 2024, an increase of 51% on March of last year, which you didn't refer to in your opening comments. And that's the highest number of homes commenced in any March since records began. And meanwhile, planning permission was granted for over 41,000 new homes in 2023, an increase of 21%. The volume of purchases by all households increased to 50,000 in the year to February 2024, with more than 1/3 of those first-time buyers. Nearly 38,000 social homes have been added to the social housing stock in Q4 2023, and that year also saw the highest level of new build social homes since 1975. 8,100 homes, 12,000 social homes delivered in total last year, if you take leasing and acquisition and so forth. And there's a strong pipeline of a further 22,500 social homes. That is the way to deal with the rental issue. We simply have to increase supply, and we have to build more homes, both social homes, affordable homes, cost rental, and so forth. And there's significant regulation of the rental market. You know that. There's been a very extensive, about 77% of the country is covered by the rent pressure zones as we speak.
Tánaiste, I asked you 2 simple questions about the law being broken in terms of rent regulation. You didn't reply, so I just ask you to reply to that in this time. And Tánaiste, the countries in Europe with the largest rental sectors also have strict rent regulation that is enforced and very good security of tenure for renters. In contrast, in Ireland, we have some of the highest rents in Europe, very poor security of tenure for renters, and the rent regulation law, limited in all that it is being flouted and isn't being enforced. So I want you to answer the question on that. What exactly, given that there's hard data, clear evidence of the law being breached, what exactly is the government doing to ensure that the law is actually enforced? Are you doing anything at all? Is that why you're not answering the question? Are you not doing anything about it? What are you going to do about it? And why is there impunity for landlords on this? Why is the law not being applied effectively on this and being enforced?
That's a wrong assertion.
The figures show it.
The law is being applied, and we've legislated for tenancies of unlimited duration. We've restricted the level of upfront payments required of tenants. Government has also legislated to increase the notice to quit period for tenancies of 3 years duration or less. The minimum amount of notice a landlord must give a tenant with a tenancy of less than 3 years duration before eviction has now been increased from 28 days to 3 months. Changes to housing assistance payment will secure and expand more tenancies. In terms of non-compliance, the RTB has enhanced powers of investigation and sanctioning and additional resources to ensure that the full protection against unlawful rents in RPZs can be enforced. As a result of the investigations conducted by the RTB today, 180 sanctions have been imposed on landlords for improper conduct, and they've been published on the RTE
180
website to date, which you didn't reference. And as I said, 77% of published sanctions for improper conduct or for breaches of rent pressure zones. There can be breaches on all sides, by the way, as well. which you never articulate. And one of
Renters
the factors,
aren't breaking rent regulation
and one of
law.
the factors in people exiting, you should perhaps maybe inquire into that also. Because
The time is up.
all I see, to be fair now, in terms of the proposal that you've put forward, I don't see any, I don't see any outcome of those proposals other than a depression, further depression of supply in the rental market. That's an issue you do really need to address.
Thank you very much.
Because if we depress supply, we're going to increase prices even more.
Thank you. Deputy Brid Smith, please.
Malesh Gael ta Tinnis Cian on Charlotte McGo. First of all, I want to read out from your own manifesto in 2020, Fianna Fáil's manifesto to the electorate, in order to sit where they're sitting now today. And all of you would have signed up to this. Ireland will fully maintain neutrality in the triple lock. Fianna Fáil reaffirms its commitment to the retention of the triple lock of the UN mandate of authorisation, government and Dáil approval prior to committing Defence Forces personnel on overseas services. And it goes on to finish, we will fully maintain neutrality and the triple lock mechanism. The programme for government that you then entered into, and I'm assuming with the insistence of yourselves and the Green Party, says overseas operations and international cooperation, the government will ensure that all overseas operations will be conducted in line with our position of military neutrality and subject to the triple lock of the United Nations government and Dáil Éireann approval. And now you want to change that. I think you should talk to us a bit about the bill you're bringing before the Dáil soon, but I also think you need to explain to people what exactly is it that you want to do that you can't already do with our defence forces inside the triple lock. Do you want to operate outside the UN Charter? Because it would appear that that's exactly what you want to do when you talk about needing to free our foreign policy from a commitment that insists that the UN must pass a motion to allow us to do it. And you've said here before, and I know you're going to say the same thing again, that you're not going to be hamstrung by Russia or China or the UK, or even sometimes you might say, for that matter, the USA. But we need to know, and here's my direct question to you today, is if that's the case, where do you want to send Irish troops? Where that you can't send them under the direction of the UN Charter, where do you actually want to send them? And is this the case that you're falling in line with others across Europe who are already giving us worrying signs that, as was said, the war clouds are gathering? The Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk claimed that we're in a pre-war era. And Admiral Rob Bauer, the chair of NATO's military committee, said, we are preparing for war with Russia. The French President Emmanuel Macron believes we should be sending troops into the Ukraine, that NATO should be sending troops. Can you please clarify for the Irish public, do you want the sons and daughters of Irish, mostly working class people, to be sent out to fight wars on behalf of the new colonial powers that are dominating the world now? Or what exactly do you need to lift the triple lock for? And don't tell me it's to pick up people who are stranded in Kabul or Somalia and can't get out, because that's not the case. Where has the UN ever stopped you or stopped this country being able to rescue its own citizens?
I was 13 years of age, well 12 actually, when the referendum to join the European Union was passed overwhelmingly by the Irish people. And what's interesting about that debate and every other debate about the European Union since then and every other referendum, people from your side of the House predicted conscription, membership of NATO, NATO tanks on O'Connell Street. That has been a consistent line adopted. And I've heard it. So I didn't interrupt you, Deputy.
But you're telling lies.
I know I'm not.
Yes,
no,
you
I'm
are.
not.
Deputy. You are.
Deputy.
There's no. We did not predict troops on the street of O'Connell Street.
You're going to be out of order.
We did not predict conscription. That is a lie.
Deputy Murphy, you're going to be out of order. The Taoiseach to respond.
The old trope of conscription, of joining a European army, has been in every referendum. Every referendum. And it's been a false. You just mentioned, was I going to send Irish troops out to fight in colonial wars? I asked you,
where do you want to send them? Where do you want to send them after you lift the triple lock?
I didn't interrupt now. I'm entitled through the chair to argue and to the House to make the points I made and to answer the questions you've raised. And my point is a very valid point. And I will not be browbeaten by you, Deputy, Just as you tried to browbeat me last year when I had a consultative forum, a basic act of democracy, participation in democracy. And all you tried everything to denigrate the chair, you tried everything to stop it, to actually stop debate. Because you don't even think we have the right to discuss these issues.
You cancelled the Citizens'
We can only
Assembly.
discuss them on your terms, through the chair. That's the only basis you think we can discuss issues like neutrality, issues like the triple lock and so on, like that. I believe in military neutrality, and we are military neutral. And the triple lock has nothing to do with military neutrality, but it has everything to do with the incapacity and the paralysis on the Security Council around peacekeeping missions. And we have a proud peacekeeping record in this country. And we're in UNIFIL and we're in Lebanon. But there are examples, Deputy, where we were not in a position. In 1999, a permanent member of the UN Security Council vetoed the renewal of the United Nations Preventative Deployment Force, and as the subsequent EU peace operation in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia did not have a Security Council mandate, Ireland was also unable to participate in that mission. More recently, in 2015, the European Union established a security mission in the Mediterranean known as Operation Sophia. This mission did not have a UN mandate until 2016. Ireland could not consider contributing to this mission until after this mandate was in place. In 2017, the Maritime Analysis Operations Centre Narcotics, which is on an international maritime intelligence centre supported by the European Union, requested a naval service ship to assist with maritime drug interdiction operations. Although Ireland is a strong supporter of the centre and was in fact one of the founding members, a ship could not be sent given that there would be no UN mandate for such an operation. So there are examples, Deputy, and there hasn't been a UN peacekeeping mission mandated by the Security Council since 2014. And I've made it very clear, despite the misleading assertions by you just now, that anything we do in terms of not wanting, we're basically proposing the removal of the UN Security Council sanction. But we have made it crystal clear that anything we'll do will be within the UN Charter. You know I've said that time and time again, yet it's disappointing that you deliberately distort the truth in terms of your assertions. Anything we do, and the latest proposal we're bringing forward, will be absolutely within the framework of the UN Charter. That's always been our esprit de corps as a country.
Well, I think Deputy Murphy is correct. It does not make any sense. It's totally illogical to say that we will operate within the UN Charter and at the same time that we want to break free of the UN Security Council, because they're part and parcel of the same package. And I'll tell you something, you've really gone back to when you were 13 and how you remember the campaign and how we threatened there was going to be troops in the street and conscription. I'm probably a bit older than you, but I certainly wouldn't have been talking about conscription. But in 2013, you have a great memory, because in 2013, when you weren't 13 and you're in the opposition benches, you said the triple lock is at the core of our neutrality, and explicitly rejected the arguments that it gives a veto to Russia or China over our peacekeeping activities. Now you're saying the opposite, and what you really mean is everything changed with the brutal invasion of Ukraine by Putin, and we are now facing a new splintered, new-style colonial world where wars are on the brink, and we want to be able to engage with other countries, with possibly NATO eventually, but definitely with the European Union, who have your ear all the time. We want to engage in military activity with them. Now I want you to say, where do you want to send troops? And will it be the sons and daughters of Irish working class people who will be sent abroad to lose their lives? Because I don't think it's going to be the sons and daughters of the people on the benches opposite me. I think you need to tell the people that. And by the way, you could make this a general election issue. If you don't want to have a referendum on neutrality, at least wait till the general election and change your manifesto from what you gave people in 2020 to one that says, I want to get rid of the triple lock. I don't believe in our neutrality.
That is a monstrous lie and assertion to suggest that removing the triple lock will facilitate or will be a factor or will result in young Irish people fighting in wars. And by the way, the European Union is not a colonial power. That exactly proves my point. You're denying what past campaigns, you've just reiterated.
I would describe it as a colonial power.
It is not a colonial power. It has no colonies. Okay? It's not Russia. It's not the real imperialism of today is Russia.
It has a colony called Israel.
And you just do pro forma. You'll articulate a formulation in this chamber. I've never seen you march.
But you don't answer
I've
the
never
questions.
seen you march on behalf of the people of Ukraine,
You
and you
don't
never
answer
will.
the question. You're wrong about that.
Because
you don't answer the questions.
Because you have presented the Ukraine war and you've presented Russia's invasion as somehow a Western European neo-colonialist
No, we did not.
project.
You
That's
haven't
what
answered the question.
have always
Where do you want to
attempted
send
do,
troops?
And it's a false dichotomy between the colonialism of the past and the sovereignty which we've achieved as members of the European Union.
I've
which
caught
has
you
always
contradicting yourself so many
which
times.
has always
You will not
respected.
answer the questions.
And can I just, I'll answer the question, I said to you, it's completely within the Charter. And we only want to be involved in peacekeeping missions, and we will have to be involved in evacuating Irish citizens, and we need to change the frame. Don't give you that. Don't give you that about Afghanistan. What about people in Afghanistan that were rescued by, and the Army Rangers were participants?
We did.
What about
didn't we?
Sudan?
Didn't we do it?
You know, you just are so dismissive of the reality of what's happening in many parts of this world. And we have to get Irish citizens out of Sudan, we have to get them out of Afghanistan. That's going to increase, Deputy. There's going to be more, unfortunately, more war situations
So
where we will have
there's going to be more
on
war
evacuation.
situations, but you want to be free to send troops to those wars.
No, to evacuate Irish citizens safely.
The time is up. Can I just ask that the questions... Can I ask that the questions would be directed through the chair and that the responses would be directed through the chair? And this, across the chamber, argy-bargy, is doing nothing for anything. Now, we have Deputy Carl Nolan, please.
Taoiseach, in the last week, the perception of the EU Just Transition Fund and its capacity to act as a catalyst for economic revival in County Offaly suffered a fatal blow. Of the 18 million available in the latest round, Offaly, the county that without doubt has been hit the hardest and indeed bore the greatest brunt of job losses at 53% of the job losses in our county, got a paltry sum of 500,000 from an 18 million fund under Just Transition. As you can imagine, this has been greeted with great disappointment, frustration and anger. And only yesterday, Offaly County Council arranged a special meeting with all of the county councillors and Oireachtas members. I attended through Zoom. And I concur with what every councillor said, of all party and none, that we are not being treated fairly in County Offaly in regard to what I call an unjust transition. I have always found it very difficult to buy into the concept of a just transition, because I saw the damage that would happen to the county when the Board Namona jobs went, with no alternatives in place, and indeed with a process that was flawed right from the very beginning, because it was accelerated with no forward vision and indeed no plan for the county. We now find ourselves in a situation where many viable projects were deemed to be unsuccessful when the applications, which were worked on by Offaly County Council Chief Executive Anna Marie Delaney and her staff. You know, yesterday we spoke about this. It's just not good enough that 500,000 has been offered to the county, considering the damage that has been done to our county, to our economy. We need intervention, and that's why I'm bringing it up here today. I'm also bringing the views of the many county councillors of your own party and all parties and none that were present at the meeting, and I'm calling for you to intervene. This situation, as I say, I've highlighted right from the beginning that I was very concerned about the just transition. And also I've called for special recognition to be given to Offaly, given that we were expected to carry the burden of 53% of job losses in our county, which is massive. And I've repeatedly argued that there is a clear and unanswerable case for County Offaly to receive the highest proportion of the funding from the Just Transition Fund. And unfortunately, perhaps we should have seen what happened in terms of the 500,000 allocation. Perhaps we should have seen that coming, because in 2022, a spokesperson for Minister of State Pippa Hackett, who's also from the constituency and represents the constituency, confirmed that Offaly had not been designated by the government as the county most disadvantaged by the decarbonisation process. Taoiseach, you only need to speak to your fellow county councillors and workers of Bord Namona to confirm that we are indeed, unfortunately, the most affected county. and we need urgent intervention. So I'm calling on you today, please, to make a commitment that you will intervene in this matter, because it's of utmost concern and it's of utmost urgency.
And I'm not quite clear as to your doubts about the Just Transition Programme, but I think it is an important programme. It's an essential programme to deal with what has been a decarbonisation agenda across the country, but obviously with a particular focus on the Midlands and Offaly, which has been at the frontier, if you like, of transformation and change in terms of energy generation and in terms of the Bord na Móna transformation, which has been very significant and will benefit Offaly in terms of the investment in Bord na Móna, which is quite substantial. I think you mentioned the EU allocation. As you know, there's been far wider investment. So I don't have readily here a breakdown of the totality of investments around the whole area of decarbonisation in terms of investments in the community more generally in Offaly, and there's been quite a significant degree of investment in Offaly and across the Midlands under a range of government investment programmes. Up to 22 million was available under the National Fund by the end of 2024 of this year. The EU Fund will provide up to 169 million until 2027. So that's a longer term transition for the region. And that arises from the end of commercial peat extraction and peat-fired power generation. And in my view, and I certainly will examine and reflect on what you have said, and the government is very anxious. Indeed, in my view, just transition has to become just transformation, because it's not just about the ending of certain types of economic activity. It has to be creation of new, very powerful alternative industries that can create alternative employment into the future. And I was just at the offshore wind energy conference this morning. The onshore wind energy performance of this country, notwithstanding all of the objections, has resulted in thousands of jobs, but also critically has resulted in Ireland being one of the most effective renewable countries in terms of up to 35% of electricity at any one time now provided by renewables and so forth. So there is an economic agenda, and there is, I accept your point, there's an economic need here, and those areas which have had to, who are impacted the most, need the greatest levels of support and intervention. I agree with that. And that has to be through a combination of national funds and European Union funds. And I didn't have, prior to coming, the specifics of the applications that Offaly County Council made, but I will, again, I know that Deputy Barry Cowan has been a long-standing and a very committed activist in respect of Offaly in the Midlands, more generally in respect of this agenda. And I'll certainly engage with the deputies and with the councils from the area to examine this situation further.
I just again want to reiterate that there hasn't been any proper, sustainable job creation as a result of what happened. So in my mind, this process will not be seen as just by me and by many others in the county until we can actually see jobs being created. Now, the job creation is going to be highly dependent upon the investment that comes in. And the fact that we have only received €500,000 out of an €18 million pot, it is scandalous. It's a national scandal. It has to be looked at, because we need this type of money to be able to create jobs. And I know indeed the applications that went in from Offaly County Council that I just mentioned, you know, they were relating to towns like Tullamore, they were relating to areas like Shannon Bridge and Road in North Offaly, where there were projects that would create jobs. And we're trying to work our way out of this mess by trying to move forward and create the jobs that we so badly need in Offaly. But again, that can't happen. And particularly if we're only given 3% of a funding pot, it's just not acceptable. We need urgent intervention, and I do accept your constructive response, and thank you for agreeing to look into the matter. But we need some urgency as well.
Thank you, Deputy Nolan. To conclude.
There is a national fund. And I don't have the breakdown of the National Fund in terms of its allocation to Offaly and other counties. I think you're talking specifically about the 18 million that was under the EU, and the EU is about, I think, 100 and, I mean, there's obviously further allocations to be made from the EU fund, because the EU fund will provide up to 169 million. You said there was 18 million allocated to date, but there's 169 apparently until 2027. Now, maybe some of the projects may not be ready for this particular allocation and maybe will be funded through further allocations. But what I will do is I'll examine the situation and will revert back to the deputies from the region, and we'll talk to fellow ministers as well in respect of the issue. Because we want just transition to be effective and successful. We need to transform the counties that are most impacted by the peat fire power stations and so on like that. And I think most people agreed in the region they were never going to be the future, so therefore, but you do require and you do deserve replacement investment and industries.
Okay, thank you. That concludes leaders' questions. We move